inviting you to get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion, the book that helped stop the Mormon coup, the neocon Mormon coup in Washington, D.C., and send Mitt Romney back to Bain Capital with his hedge fund hyenas and his vulture capitalists and his rip-off artists. The book that will join my study of 20 years ago, George H.W. Bush, The Unauthorized Biography, and my two books on Obama. These are permanent acquisitions for your personal library. If you don't have them, you're not following the political history of the United States in our time. So that's Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. And that's at progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com of Palm Desert, California, the leading publisher of anti-establishment books. Now, right now, it's the afternoon of November 9th. We're waiting for Obama to come out and begin the process of surrender. He's going to surrender to a beaten enemy. The fascisto Republicans are reeling in defeat, and Obama is rushing to prop them up with concessions. He wants to use the hysteria of the fiscal cliff to motivate another sellout after his sellout of December 2010, when he prolonged the rapacious, predatory Bush tax cuts for the super rich, after the deficit sellout of April 2011, after the Satan sandwich where he caved in to naked blackmail on the national default, instead of using the inherent powers of the 14th Amendment to say, sorry, Republicans, the national debt will get paid. I'll negotiate with you, but the national debt is a commitment that has already been assumed, and it will be paid, come hell or high water. Now we're going to have the fourth round of large-scale surrender, capitulation, groveling, and treachery by Obama. He's going to say, thank you to my supporters, and now I'm going to stab you in the back. Thank you to my supporters, and now I will betray you and your aspirations. But we'll have enough time for this in a minute. I'm not going to be able to report on the speech in detail because he hasn't even started it yet. What happened this past Tuesday? Congratulations to the American people. By your own efforts, you have headed off a cold coup and a creeping coup in these institutions. And we'll go through the outlines of the permanent austerity dictatorship, once again, that might have been, that almost was, that now will not occur in that form. And what the ruling class is left with, and this is not their option A, this is their option B, Obama is not what they wanted. This is a defeat for the ruling class itself. Even with all their money and all their media and all their hype, they couldn't put the Wall Street asset stripper Romney into the White House. The Bilderberger didn't make it. Romney was simply too unacceptable. A hedge fund hyena, a Wall Street asset stripper, a vulture capitalist, a private equity leveraged buyout operator, Mr. Wall Street, the 1% embodied. I like to fire people. My horse is in the Olympics. My rich wife will tell you all about it, and on and on. Imagine the degradation if the American people had capitulated to such a figure. What shame, what shame, what shame. This was avoided. And in particular, the overreaching of the coup artists, the overreaching of the Karl Roves and the Koch brothers, they thought they could already begin to restrict the franchise. They thought that they could deprive people of the right to vote, and they tried to use voter ID. They tried to shut down early voting. They tried to cut the hours. They tried to harass people. And the result was that a lot of people who were indifferent to voting realized how much they wanted to vote. People, unfortunately, this is human psychology. Nobody wants something so much as when somebody's trying to take it away from you. And this is the backfire, along with, I think, other questions of higher principle, that is now blown up in the face of these reactionaries. So it was the blacks, the Hispanics, the poor, the old, and the young who came out and voted. And by voting, they were able to stop Romney. Now, we're in the middle of all this. We want to point to the Michigan Proposal A. Michigan Proposal A was coming from Governor Snyder. I had this garbled in the previous broadcast. Michigan Proposal A said that Snyder, the governor of Michigan, can send in little Hitlers. He can send in austerity dictators to run places like Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Ecorse, the Detroit school system, other school systems, other localities. This was defeated by about 52 to 48. It only won 2 counties in all of Michigan. It was defeated. It shows that if you're not carrying the dead weight of Obama and the Democratic Party, or that guy Barrett in Wisconsin, if you're not carrying some Democratic hack Paul, you can win. The people here won. Democratic Party didn't win. It reminds me of the Ohio referendum back in the previous election cycle, when the working people of Ohio were able to defeat the fascist demagogue Kasich because they didn't have to carry the Democratic Party and one of their discredited, sleazy candidates. So Michigan Proposal A won. Unfortunately, Proposal B did not win. That would have given you a right to collective bargaining in the state constitution. That one has to be tried again. So hats off to Reverend Edward Pinkney, his friends at the Banco, B-A-N-C-O, the Banco Coalition in Benton Harbor, and other similar groups that got 250,000 signatures to put that on the ballot. So, by the way, the Republicans in Michigan, the most reactionary in the legislature, say now it's time to have a right-to-work law to smash all unions. That will be on the Indiana model. But even Governor Snyder, reeling in defeat, as Kasich was a year ago, says, no, that's probably too much. So Romney is defeated. We dodged a bullet. And I'm claiming some credit for Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney, the Mormon takeover of America with polygamy, theocracy, and subversion. I don't see anybody with a comprehensive polemical book, historically rooted with ideology, theology, but above all playing on the polygamy, the theocracy, and the discovery that it contains, that this entire Mormon political operation was fostered and built up and stocked with people, above all, by the British East India Company, as indicated by John Stuart Mill, Thomas Carlyle, in the essays, Charles Dickens even, that are in the book. Now, the outcome is, Sean Hannity, this is not a center-right country. This is not a fascist country. This is not a reactionary country. The United States is the anti-fascist country par excellence, and that's something to be proud of. This is New Deal America. New Deal America was the paradigm of the modern world, and it could be again. It should be again. It probably has to be again. The New Deal America means that 2/3 to 3/4 to 4/5 of the American people want to defend the New Deal reforms. They want Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, child labor laws, the apparatus of modern civilization that has to be defended against these lunatic Austrian Republicans. This is not a center-right country. It is the anti-fascist country of the modern. It's the only one that never allied with Hitler in any form. And other than that, France, Britain, Soviet Union, all allied with Hitler. Japan, all allied with Hitler. U.S. not. So that's worth something. Now, we now have to turn, though, to Obama preparing new betrayals. I'm looking at the headline on MSNBC. Obama, I'm open to compromise. No compromise. Smash the fascist Republicans. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Reminding you, if you want to know what happened in politics in your time, you better get a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Available from Progressive Press of California at progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com. Buy it today, e-copy as little as $6. I'm just listening to Obama cringing and groveling for Boner. He's calling for a balanced approach and compromise. This is fundamentally wrong. And he's conjuring up the fake fraud of the fiscal cliff. Let's get it straight. There is no fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff is a big lie. The fiscal cliff is a piece of Frank Lund's demagogy that was put out into the world by none other than helicopter Ben Bernanke. So if you're going around mouthing the slogan of the fiscal cliff, the question is, are you an agent of helicopter Ben and the rotten majority or the rotten board of the Federal Reserve System? Now, most people, the choice of the American people to vote for Obama compared to Romney, although, tragic in the absolute scale, in terms of what they could see, was rational. Obama was up there saying, tax the rich, cut the defense budget, end the wars, and defend entitlements. That's what he seemed to be saying when you got to the bottom of all the froth and the posturing. So that was certainly better than what Romney was recommending, which was to destroy entitlements. Remember, the Republican ticket, privatize Social Security, voucherize Medicare, vaporize the social safety net, and therefore euthanize large parts of the American people. So if that's the choice, then obviously Obama appears as the lesser evil. But he's running already to sell you out. Extend the middle-class tax cuts right now. That's fine, but we have to hear no cuts, no killer cuts in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or any other social safety net or program benefiting working people and the vast majority, the 99%. This is an opportunity, rather than to weep, to break the back of the Republican Party, this reactionary fascist thing. And the answer is, let these things all occur. Don't lift a finger to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff. It's not a cliff. It is not comparable to the default. The default was a catastrophic moment. The default that the Republicans actively courted in the middle of August 2011, that was a cliff. This is no cliff. This is simply, as some people call it, a slope. It's nothing. It's simply a progression. It's a continuum. There's no big deal. There's plenty of time after January 1st to fix it up. Let the Bush tax cuts expire on everybody. Then you go into the new year and say, Republicans, do you want to remove the tax increases for everybody up to $250,000 gross income, federal adjusted gross income, or not? And then watch the Republicans twist in the wind. What are they going to say? No, we are going to saddle everybody with tax hikes because we are defending the super rich parasites, the people like Romney that Americans have learned to hate. It's not a fiscal cliff. It's an opportunity to break the back of the Republican Party, to put Grover Norquist perhaps in jail where he belongs, right? Remember, Grover Norquist, as you can see on the internet, was up to his neck in cooperation with Jack Abramoff. Jack Abramoff was laundering money through various accounts associated with the anti-tax extremists. So notice also, we wanted to hear about jobs. They run on jobs, right? The campaign is all jobs, jobs, jobs on both sides. As soon as the vote is in, no more jobs, only deficits, debt. These are the obsessions of the elitists on both sides. We reject that. We're talking jobs. We're talking 30 million new productive jobs to get full employment for working people. And we're talking production and infrastructure, seizing the Federal Reserve. Now, as everybody knew, Obama's reputation, he always caves right away. It's not even that he caves right away. He caves preventively. Obama's policy has always been preventive capitulation, preventive surrender, right? Surrender before a shot is fired. Remember the public option. Well, the public option was a big nothing. Obama should have gone with Medicare for all, understandable. He might, if he'd gone for Medicare for all with the necessary energy, he might have gotten it. He didn't want it. He wanted to bail out the bankrupt private insurance companies. Remember, Wall Street agent is what Obama is. He is a Wall Street puppet, and his personal psychology is one of passivity, apathy, punctuated by euphoria in the moments of adulation. He's a weakling, a coward. He is treacherous, self-centered, narcissistic. He is all these things. We'll have to explain later in what way it was better not to have Romney, because it was. This is structural and not a matter of individuals. But Obama's thank you is, once again, to betray his own base. In other words, in the Osawatomie speech of December 2011, looking forward to the vote of November 2012, Obama assumed the mask of some kind of rather vague opposition to the Republicans and their values. He's now going to drop the mask he put on at Osawatomie, and he's going to go into these rotten compromises. He's going to give away the ranch to get some fig leaf of tax increases on the super rich. And again, the balanced approach means the super rich don't even get nicked in their fabulous sybaritic luxuries and excesses, their exorbitant wealth, not even nicked. Whereas the kinds of rotten compromise that Obama's talking about will cut to the bone, through flesh and blood and gristle and bone for the necessities of the poor and the working class, and it will gouge the amenities of the middle class as well. So that's Obama, and he's incorrigible. There's nothing much that will ever be done about this as far as I can see. So again, the third cycle of blackmail. After December 2010, April 2011, and August 2011, we now get this. And remember, the reason we have this so-called fiscal cliff, which is no such thing, is because of the Satan sandwich, that the Republicans took the country to the verge of national bankruptcy, the lunatic Austrian fringe there. Now, as we look at this current bleak situation, maybe the reactionaries themselves can save us. Remember, in this Leibnizian universe we have, the salvation of all of us is that evil often does good in spite of itself. And maybe that's Mitch McConnell and some of these other members of the werewolf faction in the House and the Senate Republican conferences. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. No time is not complete unless you have read and added to your personal collection Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. The book that helped to stop Romney in his tracks. It's the only kind of flanking operation on the anti-establishment front that confronted him when everybody else was groveling for Romney, in effect, by concentrating everything against Obama. Yours truly was able to alert you to another danger which otherwise would have gone unspoken and might have succeeded. Just on that, it's interesting to contemplate the narrowness of Obama's victory margin. He has no mandate to sell anybody out, let me tell you. After all this hoopla, Obama won the election, based on my back-of-the-envelope calculation, by 313,000 votes. 313K. 313,000 votes, if they had changed hands in the key states, would have given Romney the White House. This is too close for comfort. All you people out there who were focusing exclusively on Obama, that was badly done, let me say. That's something you're going to have to live down. It's 0.25%. The headline should be, Obama beats Romney by 0.25%. Now, you say, oh, but he won by 3 million. Yeah, 3 million in the popular vote count. That doesn't matter. Let's go through the Electoral College. Obama won by 332 to 206. if we give Florida to Obama, which seems to be the way it's going. According to my present count, gleaned off the internet and Washington Post paper copies that have come my way, Obama won Florida by 52,000 votes, 0.6%, or actually, sorry, less than that, 0.3, less than 0.3%. 52,000 in any case. Obama won Ohio by 104,000 votes. Obama won Virginia by 116,000 votes. Obama won New Hampshire by 41,000 votes. You add that up, you get 313,000 votes, 0.25%. Out of 118 million votes cast, the 313,000 gives you a margin of 0.0026 or 0.26%. That's the victory margin for Obama. Is that a landslide? Somebody was telling me the other night that was a landslide. No, sorry, not a landslide, but a squeaker. Man, was that a squeaker. It was as close as anybody said. Under these circumstances, evenly divided, right? This is where you can see how a book like Just Too Weird can move, 10, 20, 30,000 votes, make a big, big difference. And all the propaganda, the stuff I was doing against Romney, it seems to me, were thrown into the scales as best I could, and it's up to you to judge how it all worked. Now, how do we get out of this? Well, for the moment, maybe the reactionaries can help us. We have divided government. Thank God we have divided government. We have gridlock. I hope we do. The alternative to gridlock is killer cuts. It's savage, genocidal austerity. And, of course, I'm listening to these characters on National Pentagon Radio. Can Obama be a statesman? To be a statesman for those people means sell out the American people with genocidal Malthusian austerity cuts and skin them alive in his own way. Not as extreme as Romney, but maybe more effective, and they're hoping with no resistance to speak of. Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is now scripted by Jesse Benton and other veterans of the Leprechaun campaign. Mitch McConnell says to Breitbart being, I don't know what, the modern equivalent of, let's not even talk about it, about the reactionary website. McConnell says, no tax increases on the rich. The elite have to be untouchable. The privileges of the elite, the redistribution of wealth from working people to the super rich parasites is taboo, cannot be touched. So good, McConnell, good. You keep up on that. You let that little Rand push you in that direction, and Jesse Benton. Kentucky is now leprechaun land. They're all on the line of the leprechaun. And I'm sure we'll have DeMint, and we'll have Little Rand, and we'll have others. We'll have Toomey the Toomer. We'll have all sorts of absolutists, right? Purists, the ideological purists. What ideology? Austrianism, Chicagoism, but really Austrianism. I even heard Michelle Malkin say it's time to impeach Obama. She more or less implied it over Benghazi. And we know from LaRouche that Benghazi was the greatest issue in the presidential campaign. How about that? Not jobs, not even deficits, but Benghazi. This is, LaRouche has gone beyond Fox News in this stuff. And the House Tea Party caucus. Now, the lunatics have gotten more numerous. They're not going to be there here in the lame duck session, but they're coming. Flake, a name that speaks volumes. Senator Flake, the flaky senator, is coming now from Arizona, a Mormon, and we're going to also have one or two others of these extremists. Oh, Cruz, the extremist from Texas, has cruised to victory. Oh, we'll be waiting for him. And again, these people are evil, but in the world that we have, they may actually do some good because they'll prevent Obama from successfully selling out his base. Now, here's the big difference. Obama is now vulnerable to pressure. He was always vulnerable to pressure from his left. This is now open. In the first term, for many Democrats and others, Obama was seen as an awesome figure. He was the Messiah. He was the Mahdi. He was the one. He was the first black president. He was this amazing symbolic figure. Valerie Jarrett obviously believes that we have to thank Obama for deigning to rule us, right? We have to bow down to him and propitiate him and thank him for wasting his time on such unworthy people as ourselves. So that's the first term. Now it's different. Everybody can see Obama is a mediocre hack politician, careerist. He would have failed. He would have been defeated if it hadn't been for you. If you hadn't gone out there and sweated blood, if you mere mortals didn't do something to get him reelected, he would have gone down to humiliating defeat. Obama owes you big time. Don't forget it. Obama owes you big time. Now, here's what I propose. We've got to be ready for actions now during the lame duck, right? Probably by about December 15th, December 20th, Christmas Eve, this kind of time. This is when the full horror, the monstrosity of the killer cuts and Obama's betrayal will be obvious. We've got to try now. We're talking also as the United Front Against Austerity. We've got to be ready to have demonstrations here in the District of Columbia, in other cities. No cuts. Tax Wall Street with a Wall Street sales tax. Wall Street sales tax makes austerity cuts, genocidal policies against the American people unnecessary. We have the money. The big problem is that Wall Street pays no tax. So make Wall Street cough up their fair share, and not a little bit more, but a lot more. No sacrifices for the American people. They've sacrificed enough over the wretched last 4 years. So here's what I recommend. Apart from that, we've got to be ready to act during December. The one thing we know for sure is that there's going to be an inauguration now, if nothing changes, by January 21st. By January 21st, Obama will be inaugurated. That's a Monday, I believe. That means we've got a Friday, a Saturday, a Sunday, and a Monday. I recommend, and I will do it myself if I have to do it alone, time to get demonstrations here in Washington around the inauguration, peaceful, legal demonstrations to raise the demand of the Wall Street sales tax. No cuts, no austerity. The social safety net, the New Deal reforms those are the taboos, not the privileges of the super rich. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Remember to get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. You won't know the story of how Ron Paul ran as the right-wing man of Romney, unless you get this book, that this was the entire purpose of the 2012 Ron Paul campaign. Of course, in addition to spreading his ideological poisons, and to get little Rand on the ticket if he could, was to act as a right-wing wingman or border guard or gatekeeper to protect Romney from challenges coming from his right, which is where they came from, Santorum and from, to some extent, Gingrich. That's what Ron Paul was out there doing. And if you didn't see that while it was happening, you better read this book and learn how to observe politics so you understand what's going on, right? And remember, don't even look so much at the facts. Look at the method. If you can assimilate the method, the facts take care of themselves. I don't deal in information. I deal with a method that's exemplified through certain key selected facts that tell the story, ignoring a whole bunch of other facts that are extraneous or even hide the truth. And we should give Ron Paul some credit. The leprechaun has had a positive historical function in spite of his own evil intent, in spite of his own vile, foreign, poisonous Austrian ideology, totally un-American, totally opposed to the American system and the American tradition. Ron Paul helped to defeat Romney. How? Well, if you remember the primaries, we were told repeatedly by commentators, and it was true, that Ron Paul had pulled the entire Republican Party, the entire field of candidates, far, far to the right, out there to the Austrian extremes, and he did it. And he also pulled Mitt Romney, therefore, right, since he's a chameleon and has to take on the coloration of what's around him. Romney, the liar, was pulled all the way out to the right. So if you want to know How did Romney paint him into that right-wing extremist, reactionary, union-busting, race-baiting, anti-woman, anti-immigrant corner? That's partly Ron Paul. Ron Paul, the leprechaun, helped to pull the chameleon Romney all the way out there to the extreme right. And he's thereby helped to doom the Republican Party unless Obama can resuscitate it, which he's obviously going to try to do now. Remember, the Austrian school in the 50s or 60s, anybody recommending that stuff would have been considered either a madman ripe for Bellevue or Creedmoor, as they said in New York a couple of weeks ago, or some regurgitation of fascism from the 1940s, some kind of a neo-fascist. So there it is. The Republicans have followed the wedge issues all the way. You look at things like gay marriage. The line here on gay marriage from me is everybody gets the equal protection of the laws. That means it's mandated, and let's get it all enacted, and let's get that done, and let's get the issue solved, in effect, right? Institute gay marriage, and then the Republicans won't be able to use it, if they can at all, as Karl Rove did in 2004, to mobilize reactionaries, right? Because you could get some Christian reactionaries out on that you couldn't get any other way. So do that, and the anti-immigrant, Hispanophobic, Latinophobic, xenophobic stuff. The Republicans have taken the wedge issues of Lee Atwater and Karl Rove, and they've followed them all the way to their own doom. And what it shows, once again, the wedge issues were designed to chip and smash the Franklin D. Roosevelt National Coalition. Franklin D. Roosevelt dead all these decades, 60, 70 years in the grave, more powerful than vermin like Karl Rove. Now, to be happy because we avoided the permanent austerity dictatorship, right? We've got to bear this in mind. We're going to come out on inauguration weekend. January 21st is the inauguration, right? Let's get people here on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Let's get the Wall Street sales tax on the agenda, right? That we don't need austerity. Austerity is not required. Wall Street has to pay sacrifices for Wall Street, not for the American people. What we avoided is the permanent austerity dictatorship, right? The Washington Post notes Romney's campaign was marked by contempt for voters. E.J. Dionne had said, somebody called him and said, why does Romney hate the United States? Well, the book, Just Too Weird, points to the fact that this is the Mormon narrative of persecution and grievance. But here's what Romney would have brought you. If Romney had won, he would have won the Senate. That means one-party rule. House, Senate, White House, all in the hands of reactionary and worse Republicans. We would have had neocons running foreign policy, very narrow, and the CIA Mormon mafia with them, and we would have had Mormons running domestic and economic. That would have been the most narrow-based regime we've ever had, even worse than Bush, H.W. Bush, the elder. They would have then proceeded to pack the Supreme Court. It's thought that Justice Ginsburg may retire, Anthony Kennedy may retire. It's going to be at least 2 Supreme Court picks, maybe 3. Now, of course, Obama, you have totalitarian liberal like Kagan and people like Sotomayor. This is not ideal, but better than having more Scalias. And with Romney, you would have gotten more Scalias, and they would have been union busters and reactionaries and fascist judges, indeed. This would have meant more plutocracy, more Citizens United. They then would have proceeded to smash all trade unions. Remember, Romney, just like Rand and Ron Paul, ran on the national right to work. In other words, a national union-smashing, union-busting law. And at that point, with the mass organizations liquidated, they would have proceeded to restrict the franchise. Here we see the anti-American and anti-historical nature of this reactionary Republican Party. They would have restricted the right to vote, and they were doing it already in this election. They got ahead of themselves. ALEC, right, the American Legislative Exchange Council, funded by the Koch brothers, put out the directive, deprive people of the right to vote, shut down early voting, voter ID laws, harassment, intimidation, signs about you're going to go to jail and so forth. That would have gone even further. That would have been the 40-year Karl Rove, crypto-Mormon, permanent austerity dictatorship. That is worse than what you've got now. What I've just described, the permanent plutocratic austerity dictatorship under Romney that would have been started with this, would have been a low-wage hellhole, incapable of competing with China, doomed as a country. That would have been national suicide, because the Republicans, after all, are the party of national sabotage. They are the party of the negation of the nation in the name of private greed. That's their calling card, their hallmark. So we've also got to remember Billy Graham, the evangelical leaders like Huckabee, as well as the Roman Catholic bishops, have sold out Christ for politics, money, and power. Now, if you want to look at a couple of other notes on the votes, we should have done this when we went through the totals. Florida became impossible for Romney because the preeminence of the Cubans, right, known in some circles, well, you know what they're known as, the right-wing, anti-communist, privileged, anti-Castro Cubans, have now been outweighed by Puerto Ricans and other Latin Americans who are more normal in their outlook, and that has put Florida into crisis. I would stress Ohio. Winning Ohio for Obama was made possible by the campaign for the referendum last November that the Ohio unions mobilized to defeat Kasich on the right-to-work law. Virginia. For Virginia, Obama can thank Transvaginal Bob, that is Bob McConnell, I guess his name is, the reactionary governor of Virginia. Remember, he was the one flirting, if I can say it, with these pre-abortion exams, very invasive, very, very humiliating, and so forth. And, New Hampshire, probably because they'd seen the failure of Romney as governor. So those states, but notice especially the trade union mobilization in Ohio was key there. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, Webster Tarpley, Washington, D.C., our second hour. Let's just continue with some notes about these elections. Very interesting. The Tea Party crowd has suffered heavy, heavy losses in quite a number of state legislatures. Let's see, at least one house has been lost to the Tea Party in New Hampshire, Oregon, Colorado, New York, Maine, it's both. Minnesota, it's both. We've had heavy Tea Party losses in Florida, Arizona. I guess we've got the interesting thing is the future of North Carolina, Texas, and Georgia. We'll get to this in just a minute. Right now, though, remember, just too weird. Bishop Romney and the Mormon takeover of America with polygamy, theocracy, and subversion. Get it now. You will not have understood what you just lived through if you don't see the deeper historical tendencies. In particular, those of you who were fooled by Ron Paul, you better read this so maybe next time you don't get fooled again quite so easily, perhaps. Get it from progressivepress.com. Progressive Press of California. You can get it at progressivepress.com, as little as $6 for the book. Now, the second thing is, the timetable ahead is be ready for demonstrations in mid-December or thereabouts in Washington and elsewhere. The key slogan is Wall Street sales tax, no austerity, no killer cuts, no genocidal austerity. It's not necessary. It, by the way, will not balance the budget. Austerity makes the deficit bigger, but it kills people and destroys society. In the process, see Germany 1930 to 1932 under that guy called Brüning. We have the answer. Seize the Fed, start issuing tranches of $1 trillion. Just to sum it up, though, this situation is not comfortable. We may be in a party realignment, and I hope we are. There are many signs that we are. On the other hand, Romney's margin of defeat, 313,000 votes, or 0.26 of 1%, just a little bit over 1/4 of 1%, that's too close for comfort. We almost pitched into a permanent austerity dictatorship under Mormons and neocons. Not pretty. Here's the question now. Why not move now to smash up the Republicans while you can do that? That's what I would recommend. First of all, the Tea Party, right? They say the Tea Party has grown in the House. The Tea Party has grown in the Senate. Good. Let them take over and lead these people out into fanatic land. We've also got to look forward. The presidential election is over, but the congressional election of 2014 is typically the time when the opposition party has significant gains. Right? Clinton, the last time with impeachment, was really the only recent exception of any note. So you don't want this to take its own course. As I said, the first thing you want to do, let the Bush tax cuts lapse, then turn around and say, Republicans, we're willing to roll back that tax hike, in effect. We're willing to restore the Bush rates for people up to $250,000 per person or something like this. And are you going to stop that to defend the privileges of the super rich and make them twist in the wind and smash them up that way? We'd offer a tax cut for the middle class. That's what it would be. And don't let the ratings agencies get on your case. They need to be investigated. They need to be indicted for corruption, for insider trading, and all the rest. Michele Ruggero of Trani in southern Italy shows the way. There's also a magistrate near Milan who is delving into these things, and we'll try to report on that in the coming weeks. So what you do with that is you say to the Republicans, either you will abandon your defense of parasitical privilege, or you will most likely lose the Congress in 2014 instead of gaining. Because, of course, if you don't fight the Koch brothers, if you don't give the Koch brothers what they want, then they will stop funding you. Secondly, propose a Wall Street sales tax, for heaven's sake, to reduce or eliminate the deficit. And that means no cuts and no need to attack Social Security, no need to attack your own base. Because if Obama does attack his own base, he's going to create a crisis inside the Democratic Party. So let Boehner resist that and let him lose the 2014 vote. The other one is obviously this. Given the importance of Hispanics now, 10% of the electorate, propose really not just a comprehensive immigration reform, but a generous, forward-looking, humane plan to say there are 11 or 12 million undocumented immigrants here, largely Hispanic. We want to regularize and normalize this as fast as we can. Get these people citizenship within 2 or 3 years at the most, unless there are extenuating circumstances like criminal record or something like this. Most Hispanics should become citizens within 2 to 3 years. This is the future. We just passed the Maryland Dream Act, one of the good things on the Maryland ballot, that if you're a illegal, undocumented foreigner brought here in your younger years, you can get in-state tuition at the University of Maryland and similar institutions. That's the path. Regard this as your labor power. This is your main asset in the world economy. You've got to upgrade your labor power fast and stop with this vindictive, lunatic nonsense of race haters and old, crabbed white men who are worried about losing some dream world of sitcoms from the 1950s. It's ridiculous. If you're going to do that, though, the one thing you need to do, raise the minimum wage to at least $11 an hour for starters. And I say $11 an hour is the equivalent of the highest level ever reached by the federal minimum wage in actual constant dollar buying power. That was reached in 1968. So right now it's $7.25. Take it up to $11 an hour and enforce it so that you won't have the problem of newly naturalized immigrants undercutting people and driving down wages. So if you put an $11 floor under it, that's a step in the right direction. After that, you'd want to make that into a living wage. I would say in line with this. It's time to push full statehood for the District of Columbia and to offer statehood to Puerto Rico. Yes, for the black community, D.C. statehood would mean most likely 2 black senators in the Senate, Democrats. Puerto Rico would mean 2 Puerto Rican senators in the Senate. Could be Democrats or Republicans. We'd have to see. But this is the future. Drop the barriers. Obama doesn't want to do any of these things, by the way. We just heard the D.C. Politics Hour here on the local station. Obama probably not going to lift a finger. So go ahead and do that. How about this? You want to do something about campaign finance reform? It's simple. Without muzzling free speech at all, without burdensome regulations that chill participation in elections, just have a tax on super PACs. A tax on super PACs. Let's start with a 25% tax on super PACs. In other words, if the Koch brothers want to put $10 million through some super PAC, great. They're going to pay $2.5 million in taxes. And in the process, you make the donors reportable, so you can put that up on the internet. That will help to put the Koch brothers out of business. A 25% tax on money going through super PACs. The other thing is concerning New York and New Jersey, right? Let the Republicans fight this. It's time to stop foreclosures in the states of New York and New Jersey, on our way to doing it everywhere, to be sure. But you can always do it as Lincoln did it with the Emancipation Proclamation. If you do it under emergency provisions for stricken areas, as he did during the war, you can get something through. So halt all foreclosures, debt moratorium for every individual who's been slammed by the storm, and force the Fed to issue those 0% century bonds for rebuilding. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we're just pondering how one could cut the Republican Party down to size, reduce it to a regional southern and western party, primarily rural areas, primarily low information voters. They would be dealing in racism, xenophobia, nostalgia, I suppose. They're reactionaries, of course. They reject most of the features of the modern world. But in order to do that, you let the Bush tax cuts expire, then you enact a tax relief for the middle class only up to $250,000 per person. I would say you would stop the ratings agencies by sicking the FBI on them. That would already hurt the Republicans. You would then propose a Wall Street sales tax to render all entitlement cuts superfluous. Remember that entitlements are supported by 2/3 to 3/4 to 4/5 of the American people, from 65% up to 80% plus want the entitlements, as we'll see. The problem of American politics is 80% of the American people want the entitlements, but there's no political party that represents the defense of the entitlements, certainly not the Democrats, as we will soon see with Obama's treachery looming. So we want the Wall Street sales tax. Wall Street pays for the Depression, not us. A 25% tax on super PACs to frustrate the plutocrats. They were already frustrated because their money simply doesn't work, right? You can imagine one Koch brother turning to the other and saying, "What's wrong with our bloody millions today?" Right? They weren't working. Most of the, or Karl Rove, too, being part of it, right? What's wrong with my bloody hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Almost $500 million that he spent to no purpose, taking the bloom off plutocracy. Let's also propose statehood for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. This would reflect the country that we have and help the Republicans into their permanent minority status. And it would break up this white millionaires club in the Senate, male and female. We would also need to have comprehensive immigration reform so that everybody who's here, who works, and who's not a criminal becomes a citizen in 2 to 3 years at the very most. And we want immigrants of all kinds, along with all other persons in the jurisdiction, to enjoy in-state tuition wherever possible, because we want to have an educated workforce, and we want to attract people into this country instead of driving them away. If the Republicans ruled the United States, the United States is about as attractive to skilled and interesting immigrants as the Republican Party is to anybody with a brain. In other words, not attractive at all. So let's then propose something for New York and New Jersey. We want to stop all foreclosures for 5 years or the duration of the emergency, whichever lasts longer. If you can document that you have been hit by the storm, you get a debt moratorium for the same period. Rebuilding, instead of using low-interest federal disaster credits, let's get no-interest federal disaster loans out of the Federal Reserve, not on budget, but lent out by the Fed. 0% century bonds issued by Helicopter Ben. And the way you do that, two ways. One is a real president that we don't have and won't have, calls him up and says, guess what, Ben, tomorrow you are going to put $1 trillion up there, 0%, 100-year credit. We're going to rebuild the entire New York metropolitan area, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, other places around there. We're going to build the Tappan Zee Bridge. We're going to put the tunnel into the river. We're going to storm-proof New York Harbor. We're going to do all that. And you, the Federal Reserve, is going to make a key contribution, because you just can't sit on the sidelines and worry about bankers when the city there, New York, where these zombie banks are located, is sinking beneath the waves. So we're going to fix that. Most immediately, order the Pentagon to distribute free gas in these places. Get the Red Ball Express going. You know, that was the truck convoy system from the French ports to the front in World War II in Europe. The Red Ball Express of gasoline to Rockaway, to Canarsie, to the Jersey Shore, all of it, to the Maryland Eastern Shore here, the Delmarva, all of these places, wherever there's a shortage. The other thing is, get your FBI working, find some gougers, and put on some show trials. Indict some speculators who are gouging the people with exorbitant gasoline prices, and get them to do the perp walk, and you'll be popular, and the Republicans will scream, and they'll dig themselves deeper into their grave. I think I mentioned the 25% tax on super PACs, and here's the thing not to do. No carbon tax. No hysteria about global warming. Forget it. No cap and trade. No Waxman-Markey. No, 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 no. It's a fraud. It's junk science. It's for charlatans. It's a Malthusian nightmare. Go back and read Jevons on peak coal back in 1865, and you'll see how idiotic the Malthusian method is. So don't let anybody hijack this moment. You'll remember at the beginning of 2007, when you had a new Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, we had Al Gore coming forward with the inconvenient truth to hijack and divert and mislead the ferment that was going on. So all of this can be done and should be done. And the result of that would be you'd cut the Republican Party down to size. Now let's put this into historical context, always indispensable. It turns out now that what we have just lived through is a party realignment. And you know what I've talked about, the party systems, and we'll go through them in a minute. I talked about this in 2004 in connection with Kerry versus Bush the Younger. I talked about it in 2008 because it seemed to me at that time that Obama, running this intensely personal Messiah campaign with all kinds of messianic and utopian promises, was not a vehicle that could actually carry out a party realignment. But it has happened behind our backs. In other words, we've just had what I would call a party realignment by default. By default. Not that it was the result of human agency in the sense of a great leader like Washington, Lincoln, or Franklin D. Roosevelt, who ushers in a whole new cycle of politics. But it's happened through a demographic process of accretion and general ideological exhaustion. In other words, it's a party realignment born out of entropy. It's a party realignment, I think, but it's not satisfactory. It's weak. It's not ideologically clear. It's up for grabs still. It's open to being aborted or consolidated. We wish to consolidate on the basis of the right program and the right ideology. We'll talk about program in a minute. The ideology we want, we can say obviously what we don't want. We don't want communitarianism. That's not the way to go. We don't want equality of sacrifice among those who start off on such different footings. So we've got 2 segments left. We'll devote one of them to the party realignment question, and then to we can talk about communitarianism and related issues. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, things to do. Get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion, from ProgressivePress.com. ProgressivePress.com, representing Progressive Press of Palm Desert, California, the leading publisher of anti-establishment works in this country, deserving of your support, as I hope your humble servant. Marching orders for the Twitter brigade. You got to put out things celebrating the victory of the anti-Snyder, anti-fascist movement. The little Hitlers in Michigan are going to be sent home. No more austerity dictatorship in the towns of Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Ecorse, Detroit school system, and so forth. Fascist forces in Michigan in disarray, thanks to the heroic efforts of Reverend Edward Pinkney of Banco, B-A-N-C-O, and his friends. They got 250,000 signatures, and then they went on to win the vote. Snyder defeated in the same way that Kasich was defeated. So that's the record. And this, of course, the background for this election is the fight against those fascist Republican governors, against Snyder and Kasich and Walker and the rest of them, and a lot of other places, right? And the backlash against the Republican-dominated state legislatures, a lot of which have now been overturned. But we want to also then remind people, hold yourself ready for demonstrations in mid-December when we get the timetable. Maybe we'll have to call one, for the 15th or 20th of December. We'll try to give at least a month lead time on that. We've got to get the Wall Street sales tax on the agenda. Use Twitter for that, too. No austerity needed. Killer cuts don't work. They do kill people. They don't eliminate the deficit. They make the deficit bigger. And above all, there's no reason for any of this. The Wall Street sales tax. Wall Street pays no tax. Even Bernie Sanders was on TV saying only 1 out of 4 U.S. corporations pays any corporate income tax at all. And that's largely financial services now. So let's talk about the party realignment. It turns out we're now in one, but it's such a feeble one, and this is not a good sign, that we only notice it now. We can only confirm it, let's say, in retrospect. It turns out that 2008 did mark the beginning of a party realignment. This is something you'd never know. You never know it until it's been confirmed, and now it seems to be confirmed, albeit by 313,000 votes, or 0.26% percent of the 118 million or so votes cast. Now, the party realignment is simply this. We've had 6 party systems so far in U.S. history. They generally amount to a party which tends to win, another party that tends to lose. They're associated with geographical or ideological formulas or voting block formulas for winning. Let's just go through and you'll get the idea. From 1789 to 1828, so for actually 40 years, we had the first party system, which was started by the Federalists with Washington and Adams, actually the U.S. government founded by Alexander Hamilton, never forget it, sabotaged by Thomas Jefferson and his pal Aaron Burr. And then you get the Jeffersonians with Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, somewhat improved under Monroe. It's a 40-year cycle that succeeds at least in the minimum of establishing the independence of the country and getting some kind of economic development going under John Quincy Adams at the tail end of the cycle. So we have one great president at the beginning, that's Washington, advised by Hamilton, and we have one great president at the end, John Quincy Adams. Jefferson, of course, is a complete slob who almost lost the country with the help of Albert Gallatin who had made sure there was no national defense. That's why the White House was burned 200 years ago. The second party system is the Jacksonian one, 1828 to 1860. You see, this is 32 years. This is an absolute disaster. This is leading to civil war. How could it be worse? The Civil War is the responsibility of the Jacksonian system. It's essentially playing the easily manipulable and easily excitable frontiersmen against the centers of power in the East, who are themselves degenerate, right? The New England secessionists and so forth are running Boston, Astor, finance capital beginning to rise in New York City. This is a failure because it aborts, above all, the main institution for economic development, the Bank for the United States. Yes, indeed. Jackson's campaign against the bank, leading to the Panic of 1837 and then the slide into civil war. The third system, 1860 to 1896. This is founded by a great president, Abraham Lincoln, the greatest man of the 19th century, bar none. And make no mistake about it, don't listen to Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn hates civilization, and he hates the architects of civilization. Dump him. Get rid of him. Howard Zinn is the worst charlatan in the historical universe. I wish he was still around. I'd love to debate him and expose him as a Rousseauvian, an enemy of civilization. With Lincoln, of course, we save the Union, and then we go on to create the greatest industrial superpower the world had ever seen. We get farmers brought in with the Homestead Act. We get all kinds of positive things. Of course, it's marred inside of it by the Coin Act and the Specie Resumption Act of 1873. In other words, the return to the gold standard in 1873 was the worst possible outcome, and that gives rise to the populists who are our ancestors today. The Omaha Convention of 1890 is in our family tree. The third system, 1896 to 1932, this is started by McKinley in the McKinley-Bryan election of 1896. This is bad. This is Wall Street Republicans. This is dominated by Morgan, Rockefeller, Mellon, these creatures, right? It leads to the Roaring Twenties, the Mellon presidents, right? McKinley starts it, but by the time we get to Harding and Coolidge and Hoover, they're all serving under Andrew Mellon. So that's a failure. So far we've had the first one with Washington is successful. The second one with Jackson is a failure. The third one with Lincoln is successful, although with problems. The fourth one, problems due also to Lincoln's assassination, I might say. The fourth one with McKinley, a failure, although not all is lost. 1932 to 1968 is the most successful so far. That's the Franklin D. Roosevelt New Deal coalition. That is the one that fights the Depression, defeats the Depression, prevents fascist coups in the United States, and there were several. It defeats fascism in the world. It's the only anti-fascist force that's always anti-fascist anywhere on the planet. And with this, we defeat fascism, we defeat communism, we unlock the secrets of the atom, and we put people on the moon. Yes, we did. And this is obviously a formula, a national coalition composed of the cities, machines, of labor, of the South, of minorities, and some farm states. Even Utah voted against the advice of the Quorum of the 12 and the First Prophet. Utah voted for Roosevelt 4 times. So there's always hope of redemption for anybody. So that's the New Deal, and you know the high regard we have for that. That's essentially the repertoire, right? The archive of policies that we've got to update and reimpose. Then from 1968 to 2008, and that turns out to have been it. Another 40-year cycle, which is now over, thank God. That is the one founded by a scoundrel, by Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, and it's the Southern strategy, playing off the racist backlash in the Southern states against the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, and, of course, backlash against the anti-Vietnam War movement and student movement and other things. This is Kevin Phillips. Don't ever, let Kevin Phillips forget that he's the architect of that. That one is a failure. There we have a decline of 2/3 in the standard of living. That leaves us where we are now. And we'll talk about that one in just a minute. Rushing ahead now in our last segment to wrap up this analysis. We've just gone through the various party systems. The one founded by Washington in 1789, the one founded by the sinister Jackson in 1828, the one founded by the great Lincoln in 1860, the one founded by the well-meaning but inadequate McKinley in 1896, the one founded by the great Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1932, the one founded by the scoundrel Nixon in 1968 based on the reactionary racist Southern strategy. And you can see what it all means. In the New Deal cycle, Democrats tend to win. The consolidation of the New Deal, even Eisenhower acts very, very reasonably. In the 1968 to 2008 one, reactionary ideas are in the ascendancy. Even people, Democrats like Clinton and so forth, betray the heritage of the New Deal. Now we're in the next one is now the 2008 to what? 2048 or somewhat less. It's already clear some of the ideas about this. It's going to be the Democratic Party, at least initially, having maintained the support of Black America, Hispanic America, Asian America, and labor, and women, and urban populations, the most active and the most enlightened, the best educated parts of the country, the two coasts, deep inroads into the Midwest. And now we're seeing also that the solid South and West bloc is, there are all kinds of forces impinging on it. Virginia, now a purple state. Florida, purple state. North Carolina, somewhat purple. They say within the next cycle or two, Texas and Georgia will be purple. And that will be the doom of the reactionary Republicans. And I don't see how they change because they've got these blocs, right? You know what they've got? The evangelicals who are obsessed with abortion. That means women will always turn against it. You've got the warmonger reactionaries who are xenophobic. That's always going to be a problem. And the libertarians who are going to be in favor of genocidal austerity. Therefore, you can't win Florida. And the fiscal conservatives who also want genocidal austerity. So I don't see how the Republicans get out of it. And whatever the Republican Party decides to do, what are the Koch brothers going to do? What's Richard Mellon Scaife going to do? What is the Club of Growth going to do? What is Grover Norquist going to do, as long as he's still at large? These people will not change because this is the formula that's given them money and power. Now, notice again, the current party realignment is a weak one. We have no towering figure who launches it. We have no Washington, no Lincoln, no FDR. We don't even have a scoundrel of historical magnitude like Andrew Jackson. It's just Obama, who doesn't really qualify, right? He's known as the recluse of the White House. He has no personal relation with anybody in the Congress. But what has happened here is that demographic changes have gradually occurred, and it was not clear in 2008 that that was it. But I think in retrospect that may well have been it. Now, I would also urge people, this is seen as ethnic voting blocks rather than policy and ideology. Don't forget the policy and the ideology. Remember, the oligarchical method for the United States is to see everything in terms of ethnic diversity, ethnic blocks. At the same time, the ideology is weak, and then we have an atmosphere of ideological exhaustion and indifference. But here's what could happen. The Republicans, as we mentioned before, are dwindling towards being the party of the South and the West, but focusing on racist reactionaries, people who have put their life into guns and survival food stocks and anti-government ideology. They're available to vote for the worst Tea Party fanatics, the Ron Pauls, the Rand Pauls. They have put themselves on the wrong side of history. That's unfortunate, but they have. So they're voting for the party of national sabotage, right? The Republicans, barbarians, lunatics, union busters, people from the 19th or even the 18th century. And some of them have gained now, right? Flake and Cruz. But still, if Texas and Georgia go purple, you can see that solid red bloc has then got some serious encroachments. But here's the hopeful part. The point about all this is, of course, to reduce the specific power of the reactionary Republicans. But now, the Democrats, equally dangerous for our future. These two, the Democrats can well split into two parties, in effect, or two factions. In other words, you look at the Democratic Party now, and you're seeing it very clearly. You've got the Wall Street Democrats and union busters, somewhat more subtle but more effective union busters than Governor Walker or Governor Kasich or Governor Snyder. So the Wall Street Democrats, Obama, Schumer, Durbin, Pelosi, with some left cover, but she's still one of them. They see the Democratic Party as a confederation of identity groups, right, practicing identity politics. It's purely ethnic. They don't seem to understand that the votes they get come from people who want to defend Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the New Deal, New Frontier, and Great Society reforms. If Obama now turns around and attacks his base and attacks these reforms, that will tend to blow up the Democratic Party. Now, I hope that doesn't mean aborting a party realignment away from the reactionary Republicans. I hope not, because we can discern something else that might be recuperable, right? That might not be so incorrigible and so hopeless as these Wall Street Democrats. You've got some kind of populist Democratic force now emerging, people who are pro-labor. Let's take a look at them. Sherrod Brown in Ohio is probably the most pro-labor senator, and he defeated that guy Mandel, who was a repulsive little character, a repulsive little creature who had tens of millions of dollars from the super PACs. That's why we want to tax him by 25%. But Sherrod Brown, the most pro-labor candidate, won. Elizabeth Warren, the most pronounced anti-Wall Street candidate, won against Scott Brown and I Drive a Truck, who was an agent of State Street Bank and made Barney Frank, the Dodd-Frank legislation, as bad as it is. So we've got pro-labor and anti-Wall Street. Some people say this Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin fits into the model. Possible. And there may be other people in the Senate, right? We're still looking. We're told that some of them out there are post-partisan. I don't know. We're going to investigate. At the same time, in the House, it's clear. You got Marcy Kaptur, you got Barbara Lee, you got DeFazio. I think you've got Sherman still. You got parts of the Progressive Caucus, even some parts of the Black Caucus that would be part of it. Could not that populist Democratic faction evolve towards the presidency? Let's say this guy Sherrod Brown runs for president in 2016. Right? This is a whole lot better than Feingold or people like this. Obviously, I'm aware of the problems. Don't tell me. I'm trying to chart a path out of the crisis and, above all, away from the brink of the abyss and the inferno. So it seems to me that the action of the United Front Against Austerity should be to act independently, not to join any of this. Oh, no, but to inject program and organizing method, right? Organization, leadership, program, and strategy, and try to catalyze the anti-Obama sentiment in the Democratic Party to then focus on factions, currents, as they used to be called in Italy, and then perhaps taking over the Democratic Party. But you can only do this from outside. Now, again, let me stress, this is not just an ethnic or a gender event. That's the old political thinking. This is based on reactionary politics. It's not just that they attacked Hispanics, women, but they also attacked labor. And this is the Koch brothers and ALEC and the Americans for Prosperity and this lockstep, right, the plutocratic Republicans and their union busting. Because I say the roots of the defeat of Romney are to be found in the Wisconsin struggle, the Ohio struggle, the Indiana struggle, which failed, and the Michigan one that has just led to some good results. And then let me just remind you again, the communitarianism of Amitai Etzioni is now the official ideology of Obama. We will fight it. We want class consciousness and class defense, not communitarianism at all. And women are not instinctively communitarian. So we'll see you next week. Remember, Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover America. be ready for demonstrations in mid-December against austerity, and above all, for sure, prepare to come to Washington, I propose, on the weekend right before the inauguration, January 21st. And we'll see you again next week. We're inviting you to get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion, the book that helped stop the Mormon coup, the neocon Mormon coup in Washington, D.C., and send Mitt Romney back to Bain Capital with his hedge fund hyenas and his vulture capitalists and his rip-off artists. The book that will join my study of 20 years ago, George H.W. Bush, The Unauthorized Biography, and my two books on Obama. These are permanent acquisitions for your personal library. If you don't have them, you're not following the political history of the United States in our time. So that's Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. And that's at progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com of Palm Desert, California, the leading publisher of anti-establishment books. Now, right now, it's the afternoon of November 9th. We're waiting for Obama to come out and begin the process of surrender. He's going to surrender to a beaten enemy. The fascisto Republicans are reeling in defeat, and Obama is rushing to prop them up with concessions. He wants to use the hysteria of the fiscal cliff to motivate another sellout after his sellout of December 2010, when he prolonged the rapacious, predatory Bush tax cuts for the super rich, after the deficit sellout of April 2011, after the Satan sandwich, where he caved in to naked blackmail on the national default, instead of using the inherent powers of the 14th Amendment to say, sorry, Republicans, the national debt will get paid. I'll negotiate with you, but the national debt is a commitment that has already been assumed, and it will be paid, come hell or high water. Now we're going to have the fourth other similar groups that got 250,000 signatures to put that on the ballot. So, by the way, the Republicans in Michigan, the most reactionary in the legislature, say now it's time to have a right-to-work law to smash all unions. That will be on the Indiana model. But even Governor Snyder, reeling in defeat, as Kasich was a year ago, says, no, that's probably too much. So, Romney is defeated. We dodged a bullet. And I'm claiming some credit for Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney, the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. I don't see anybody with a comprehensive polemical book, historically rooted with ideology, theology, but above all playing on the polygamy, the theocracy, and the discovery that it contains, that this entire Mormon political operation was fostered and built up and stocked with people, above all, by the British East India Company, as indicated by John Stuart Mill, Thomas Carlyle, in the essays, and Charles Dickens even, that are in the book. Now, the outcome is, Sean Hannity, this is not a center-right country. This is not a fascist country. This is not a reactionary country. The United States is the anti-fascist country par excellence, and that's something to be proud of. This is New Deal America. New Deal America was the paradigm of the modern world, and it could be again. It should be again. It probably has to be again. The New Deal America means that 2/3 to 3/4 to 4/5 of the American people want to defend the New Deal reforms. They want Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, child labor laws, the apparatus of modern civilization that has to be defended against these lunatic Austrian Republicans. This is not a center-right country. It is the anti-fascist country of the modern. It's the only one that never round of large-scale surrender, capitulation, groveling, and treachery by Obama. He's going to say, Thank you to my supporters, and now I'm going to stab you in the back. Thank you to my supporters, and now I will betray you and your aspirations. But we'll have enough time for this in a minute. I'm not going to be able to report on the speech in detail because he hasn't even started it yet. What happened this past Tuesday? Congratulations to the American people. By your own efforts, you have headed off a cold coup and a creeping coup in these institutions. And we'll go through the outlines of the permanent austerity dictatorship, once again, that might have been, that almost was, that now will not occur in that form. And what the ruling class is left with, and this is not their option A, this is their option B, Obama is not what they wanted. This is a defeat for the ruling class itself. Even with all their money and all their media and all their hype, they couldn't put the Wall Street asset stripper Romney into the White House. The Bilderberger didn't make it. Romney was simply too unacceptable. A hedge fund hyena, a Wall Street asset stripper, a vulture capitalist, a private equity leveraged buyout operator, Mr. Wall Street, the 1% embodied. I like to fire people. My horse is in the Olympics. My rich wife will tell you all about it, and on and on. Imagine the degradation if the American people had capitulated to such a figure. What shame, what shame, what shame. This was avoided. And in particular, the overreaching of the coup artists, the overreaching of the Karl Roves and the Koch brothers, they thought they could already begin to restrict the franchise. They thought that they could deprive people of the right to vote, and they tried to use voter ID. They tried to shut down early voting. They tried to cut the hours. They tried to harass people. And the result was that a lot of people who were indifferent were allied with Hitler in any form. And other than that, France, Britain, Soviet Union, all allied with Hitler, Japan, all allied with Hitler. U.S. not. So that's worth something. Now, we now have to turn, though, to Obama preparing new betrayals. I'm looking at the headline on MSNBC. Obama, I'm open to compromise. No compromise. Smash the fascist Republicans. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, reminding you, if you want to know what happened in politics in your time, you better get a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion, available from Progressive Press of California at progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com. Buy it today, e-copy as little as $6. I'm just listening to Obama cringing and groveling for Boner. He's calling for a balanced approach and compromise. This is fundamentally wrong. And he's conjuring up the fake fraud of the fiscal cliff. Let's get it straight. There is no fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff is a big lie. The fiscal cliff is a piece of Frank Lund's demagogy that was put out into the world by none other than helicopter Ben Bernanke. So if you're going around mouthing the slogan of the fiscal cliff, the question is, are you an agent of helicopter Ben and the rotten majority or the rotten board of the Federal Reserve System? Now, most people, the choice of the American people to vote for Obama compared to Romney, although, tragic in the absolute scale, in terms of what they could see, was rational. Obama was up there saying, tax the rich, cut the defense budget, end the wars, and defend entitlements. That's what he seemed to be saying when you got to the bottom of all the froth and the posturing. So that was certainly to voting. Realized how much they wanted to vote. People, unfortunately, this is human psychology. Nobody wants something so much as when somebody's trying to take it away from you. And this is the backfire, along with, I think, other questions of higher principle, that is now blown up in the face of these reactionaries. So it was the blacks, the Hispanics, the poor, the old, and the young who came out and voted. And by voting, they were able to stop Romney. Now, we're in the middle of all this. We want to point to the Michigan Proposal A. Michigan Proposal A was coming from Governor Snyder. I had this garbled in the previous broadcast. Michigan Proposal A said that Snyder, the governor of Michigan, can send in little Hitlers. He can send in austerity dictators to run places like Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Ecorse, the Detroit school system, other school systems, other localities. This was defeated by about 52 to 48. It only won 2 counties in all of Michigan. It was defeated. It shows that if you're not carrying the dead weight of Obama and the Democratic Party, or that guy Barrett in Wisconsin, if you're not carrying some Democratic hack Paul, you can win. The people here won. Democratic Party didn't win. It reminds me of the Ohio referendum back in the previous election cycle, when the working people of Ohio were able to defeat the fascist demagogue Kasich because they didn't have to carry the Democratic Party and one of their discredited, sleazy candidates. So Michigan Proposal A won. Unfortunately, Proposal B did not win. That would have given you a right to collective bargaining in the state constitution. That one has to be tried again. So hats off to Reverend Edward Pinkney, his friends at the Banco, B-A-N-C-O, the Banco Coalition in Benton Harbor, and